book you a room at the Dorchester Hotel in London. It's where Mother was staying before she disappeared." "London?" Thomas asked with a frown. "I thought Aunt Marguerite and Tiny were in Italy. The case they're working is for some guy from Italy. Noci or something." "Notte," Etienne corrected, pronouncing the name Notte. "And he is Italian, at least on his father's side. But apparently he was born in England, so that's where Marguerite and Tiny started their search." When Thomas merely stared at him doubtfully, he added, "Bastian arranged the plane for Mom and Tiny, and he says they went to England." "So, she's in England, not Italy," Thomas muttered and began dragging out the white linen pants he'd been stuffing in the knapsack, replacing them with jeans and a couple long-sleeve shirts to go with the packed t-shirts. It was early fall. The evenings would be cooler in England. Once he'd stuffed as many clothes into the bag as he could, Thomas shifted the bulging knapsack past his cousin and hurried out of the walk-in closet. "Has Bastian heard from Jackie? Has she heard from Tiny?" Thomas asked, hurrying to the dresser drawers to find socks and underwear. Jackie Morrissey was the owner of the Morrissey Detective Agency and Tiny and Marguerite's boss. She was also the life mate of his cousin Vincent. Etienne grunted in the negative as he followed. He still can't reach Jackie. She and Vincent are in the wind. They're probably locked up in a secluded cottage somewhere enjoying each other. I know. Rachel and I didn't leave the house for several weeks after we finally got together. Thomas nodded as he crammed socks into the bag. He'd watched as each of his cousins found their life mates, and everyone had disappeared for weeks afterward. All except Bastian. The head of Argeneau Enterprises hadn't felt he could take the time away from the family company. In truth, he might as well have. The man had been working at half his usual efficiency ever since his life mate Terry returned to him. While the others had disappeared for a month or so and returned able to at least hold an entire conversation again without having to rush out of the room to be alone with their life mate, Bastian's not taking the time to get it out of his system had just seemed to drag out the length of time during which he was easily distracted. Thomas gave up trying to cram any more into his bag and began to zip it up. Finally admitting it was too full, he grimaced and pulled out the underwear he'd stuffed in, deciding he'd just have to go commando until he bought more in England. Greg tried to call Mother at the Dorchester when Lynsay started having labor pains, only to be told that she'd checked out, Etienne said unhappily. Thomas nodded as he slowly managed to work the zipper closed. Lynsay's life mate had already told the family that when they arrived at the house en masse to keep him company while Lynsay gave birth to their beautiful baby girl. Their kind couldn't go to the hospital and risk having their otherness revealed. Most immortals gave birth at home, with only an immortal midwife to aid them, but Lynsay had asked Etienne's wife Rachel to attend her. The woman might work in the local morgue, but she was also a doctor and had done a fine job of bringing the latest Argeneau into the world. "Disappearing like this just isn't like her," Thomas said with a sigh as he finally got the zipper closed. "No," Etienne agreed, "especially when she knew Lynsay was so close to giving birth. She made me promise to call if there was any sign that the baby was coming." "She made me give her the same promise," Thomas admitted. "I suspect she made every one of us promise that." They both fell silent, contemplating what could possibly keep Marguerite Argeneau from contacting her family, or at least calling to check on her daughter. The answer was simple. Death or physically not being able to call were the only things that could have kept her from doing so. Pushing that thought away, Thomas swung the knapsack over his shoulder, snatched up the binder lying on the bedside table, and headed for the door. "Are you composing something?" Etienne asked, curiously, following him out of the room. The question made Thomas's hand tighten on his binder. He'd grown up in a home filled with music. Aunt Marguerite had loved all forms of music and had ingrained that same love in him as well. He had very fond memories of falling asleep as a boy to the sweet sound of her playing various piano concertos. When he'd expressed an interest, she'd taught him to play piano and guitar. He'd gone on to learn several other instruments since then. Thomas was 14 when he'd started his first clumsy attempts to write music. Unfortunately,